Of all the American nightmares, the forgotten mortgage, the eminent domain seizure, the predatory developer, few are as audacious as the one that unfolded for a black woman who inherited her family's land. This wasn't a simple boundary dispute or a clerical error. It was a brazen, wholesale theft executed in broad daylight, where the sound of construction equipment replaced the need for a forged deed. Imagine waking up to find nearly 100 homes built on your property without your permission. It sounds like a dystopian plot, but it is a stark reality rooted in a long and painful history of land dispossession targeting black families. The land in question was more than just acreage. It was a legacy, passed down through generations, likely originating from the post-Civil War era when black families acquired property through hard-won means. It represented resilience, heritage, and hard-earned wealth. It was hers legally, rightfully, and historically, a tangible connection to her ancestors and their struggles. Yet, a homeowners association, HOA, an entity typically concerned with lawn height and paint colors, metamorphosed into a vehicle of appropriation. They saw vacant land, her vacant land, and made a calculated decision. They stepped in, laid out plots, paved roads, and began selling dreams to unsuspecting families, building 96 homes as if the property were theirs to develop. Their actions suggest a chilling assumption that she wouldn't notice, or that if she did, she wouldn't or couldn't mount a legal challenge. This presumption speaks volumes about the persistent power imbalances and the history of black land loss in America, where legal titles have often been ignored or overthrown through coercion, arcane laws, and systemic injustice. For decades, practices like heirs property issues, where clouded titles make land vulnerable to claims from outside parties, have led to an estimated loss of millions of acres of black-owned land. The HOA's move appeared to be a modern, grotesque extension of this old playbook. But here's the powerful twist. She noticed everything. And in a move of breathtaking strategic patience, she did not panic. She did not immediately confront them. Instead, she let them keep going. She understood that stopping them early would only lead to a messy, expensive legal battle over a partially developed plot. By allowing the HOA to complete its entire project, pouring millions of dollars into infrastructure, construction, and marketing, she fundamentally altered the stakes of the confrontation. The developer and the HOA were no longer just trespassers. They had become massive investors in her asset. They had, in effect, vastly increased the value of the land she already owned, but with one catastrophic flaw in their plan. They did it without ever securing legal ownership. This patient strategy transformed her position from that of a potential plaintiff into the undeniable title holder of a fully developed, income-generating subdivision. The eventual reckoning would be seismic. The legal principle is clear. Improving land you do not own does not grant you ownership. The houses, the roads, the sewers, all of it now sat upon her property. The homeowners who purchased in good faith would find their titles invalid, their investments perilously insecure. The ensuing legal morass would be a nightmare of epic proportions, but the liability would fall squarely on the HOA and the development company for their breathtaking malfeasance. This story is more than a wild legal tale. It is a profound allegory for justice delayed but strategically awaited. It is about allowing an oppressor to fully expose themselves, to invest so completely in their own wrongdoing that their downfall becomes inevitable. The woman's quiet vigilance turned the developer's greed into their own trap. She didn't just win her land back. She won it back improved, forcing a corrupt system to confront the monumental cost of its own arrogance and finally, perhaps, to pay its debt in full. Out of all the instruments of modern suburban life, few wield as much localized, often arbitrary, power as the homeowners association or HOA. These entities operate as miniature governments, enforcing covenants, collecting fees, and governing aesthetics with an authority that can feel absolute to those living within their boundaries. In this case, the HOA believed it possessed precisely this kind of unchallengeable power. Confident in their position and perhaps dismissive of the legal owner, they made a catastrophic error in judgment, mistaking silence for weakness and vacant land for free real estate. They proceeded to build on land they didn't own, operating on the arrogant assumption that their vision for the property superseded any existing claim. The woman, however, was not a passive victim. She was a strategist. Where others might have reacted with immediate, panicked outrage, confronting the builders, hiring a lawyer to file a swift injunction, she understood the deeper game at play. She recognized that a premature legal challenge would likely result in a messy, protracted, and expensive stalemate. The developers could tie up the case in courts for years, draining her resources while potentially negotiating a paltry settlement for the unimproved value of the raw land. Instead, she chose a path of brilliant, patient deliberation. Her first and most crucial step was to fortify her own position beyond any conceivable doubt. She quietly became a historian and a detective of her own heritage. She gathered every conceivable piece of evidence, the original deed, stamped and filed with the county recorder, updated land surveys that precisely delineated her boundaries, and historical ownership papers tracing the chain of title back through her ancestors. She ensured her legal claim was not just strong, but utterly impregnable. This was not a matter of opinion. It was a matter of irrefutable fact, documented and waiting for its moment. Then, she simply waited. She watched as the developers, blinded by their own progress, poured millions of dollars into her property. They graded the earth, paved brand new streets, laid water and sewer lines, and erected the frames of 96 homes. With every truckload of concrete poured and every roof shingled, the HOA and the developers were unknowingly investing in her asset. They were financially digging themselves into a hole from which there would be no escape. Her leverage wasn't just growing. It was compounding, transforming from the value of empty land into the colossal value of a turnkey subdivision. By the time the final nail was hammered in and unsuspecting families moved into their dream homes, the trap was sprung. The woman held the one card that trumped every contract the HOA had written, every dollar the developers had spent, and every mortgage the new homeowners had signed. The original, legitimate, and incontrovertible deed to the land itself. The HOA didn't just face a lawsuit for trespassing. They faced the total annihilation of their project and catastrophic financial ruin. They had walked straight into a perfectly laid trap, constructed not with bricks and mortar, but with patience, intelligence, and the unwavering certainty of law. The very power they thought they wielded had been used against them, proving that true title will always triumph over mere assumption. It began, as so many suburban conflicts do, with a politely worded yet firm notice in the mailbox. Then came another and another. The nascent Homeowners Association, emboldened by a sense of inherited authority, was beginning to flex its muscles. They issued violations for unapproved fence colors, demanded the immediate payment of annual dues, and circulated stern reminders about lawn maintenance and parking regulations. To the residents of the quiet, 96 home development, it was the annoying but predictable price of communal living. They grumbled, but most complied, believing the HOA's authority was as solid as the foundations of their homes. All except for one woman, a quiet, observant figure who had watched the development sprout from empty fields. She had remained silent for years. When the HOA's demands landed on her doorstep, she did not grumble. She went to the county records office. For days, she sifted through dusty plat maps, brittle deeds, and convoluted legal filings from decades past. What she uncovered was not a mere loophole, it was a chasm. The developers who had built the neighborhood, the real estate agents who had sold the properties, and the title companies that had insured the transactions had all made a catastrophic error. The HOA, and by extension every homeowner who answered to it, had no legal claim to the land. The entire neighborhood, every street, every park, every square foot, was still legally hers, deeded to her family generations ago, and never legally sold or transferred. Her lawsuit landed like a silent bomb. In the courtroom, she presented her evidence with a calm, unassailable certainty. Her documentation was a perfect chain of title, a historical narrative etched in official ink and paper that led directly and irrefutably to her. The lawyers for the HOA and the development company scrambled, their arguments crumbling against the bedrock of her proof. The court's decision was swift and unequivocal. the land was hers. All of it. The ruling did not just nullify the HOA. It vaporized it, exposing it as a fictional government presiding over a kingdom it never owned. The shockwaves that ripped through the community were those of pure existential dread. Overnight, the dream of homeownership transformed into a terrifying legal limbo. Families who had invested their life savings into their property were now mere occupants, their mortgages technically invalid, their equity a phantom concept. They weren't just homeowners with a difficult HOA. They were tenants on land they had unknowingly trespassed upon for years. The developers faced financial ruin from an avalanche of lawsuits. The title insurance companies braced for claims that would dwarf their reserves. The HOA board members, once minor neighborhood potentates, were now pariahs, blamed for a disaster they had unknowingly inherited. The community was trapped in a collective nightmare, a sprawling monument to a single, colossal clerical error. And at the absolute center of the maelstrom, serene and resolute, was the woman they had all underestimated. She was no longer just a homeowner. She was the sovereign of a subdivision. The quiet woman with the unassuming demeanor held the deeds to their very reality. The question hanging over everyone was not just about legal liability, but about the future itself. Would she demand rent? Would she evict them? Or would she offer to sell them the land they thought they already owned? This time at a price of her choosing? Her next move would determine the fate of 96 families, and the ground, both literal and figurative, upon which their lives were built had never felt less stable. The court's gavel strike was not an end, but a beginning. The legal victory that declared the woman the sole owner of the land was merely the key that unlocked a new and more complex phase of the battle. The HOA, now exposed as a fraudulent entity, and the shell-shocked developers, facing financial annihilation from 96 impending lawsuits, did what powerful institutions always do when cornered. They begged for a settlement. Their lawyers, once dismissive, now spoke in hushed, conciliatory tones, arriving with offers designed to make the problem disappear quietly. They presented figures they deemed generous, checks intended to compensate for a regrettable administrative oversight. But the woman was not merely settling a grievance. She was negotiating from a position of ultimate authority. She understood that their offers were not based on the true value of what she held, but on the cost of making her go away. She knew the true worth was not just in the dirt itself, but in the immense capital invested upon it. Those 96 homes, with their manicured lawns and 2-car garages, represented tens of millions of dollars in collective property value, all of it now resting on her land. The law was clear. As the rightful owner, she held an undeniable interest in every structure sitting on her property. She had the legal right to demand market-rate rent retroactively for years of occupation, to file liens against the homes themselves, or to pursue an ownership stake in each and every one. The developer's attempts to erase her claim through financial sleight of hand had spectacularly backfired. Their initial arrogance, their refusal to engage with her concerns before the lawsuit, had transformed a potentially manageable title dispute into an existential threat to the entire development. By forcing her to court, they had not only validated her claim, but had it entered into the permanent public record, strengthening her position immeasurably. They had, in effect, handed her a fortune and then dared her to claim it. The eventual resolution was not a simple cash payout for the land. It was a complex, multifaceted settlement whose precise details remain shrouded in confidentiality agreements, but whose outlines speak to a staggering outcome. Reports suggest that rather than selling the land outright, she negotiated for a perpetual ground lease, ensuring a continuous, generational income stream from every single property. Other accounts indicate she gained significant ownership stakes in the homes themselves or received a colossal, 8-figure lump sum that reflected the development's total equity. The HOA, as it was dissolved and reconstituted under terms she ultimately approved, its authority forever checked by her underlying ownership. But this was more than a personal windfall. It was a profound historical statement. The land in question was not just any plot. It was acreage that had been in her family for generations, passed down through a black family in a nation where such legacies were often systematically stripped away through violence, coercion, and legal trickery. The developer's error was not just a clerical failure. It was a failure to recognize the enduring power of that legacy. They had assumed the past could be easily papered over, that her claim was a relic. In doing so, they learned a brutal lesson. Her victory became a powerful modern parable. It was a reminder that land ownership, particularly for Black families whose history on this soil is deeply intertwined with struggle and resilience, carries a weight that transcends paperwork. It is a connection to ancestry and a claim to future prosperity that cannot be easily dismissed. What started as an attempt to silence her and erase her heritage ended up cementing it, making her not just a landowner, but the foundational power upon which an entire community now legally rested. The ground had literally shifted beneath their feet, and she was. The saga of the 96 homes built on land they never truly owned is more than just an extraordinary legal anomaly. It is a masterclass in vigilance, a stark warning to powerful institutions, and a profound testament to the enduring value of heritage. The takeaway from this unbelievable story is not found in a single lesson, but in the powerful layers of meaning it reveals. First and foremost, it is a resounding testament to the transformative power of knowing your rights and having the courage to enforce them. The central figure in this drama was not a corporation or a team of high-priced lawyers, but an individual who refused to be intimidated. She could have been easily bulldozed, both literally by the developers and legally by the HOA's barrage of demands and threats. Instead, she chose to stand firm. Her victory was forged not through loud confrontation, but through quiet, meticulous strategy. She weaponized patience, dedicating herself to the painstaking research in dusty archives that would uncover the truth. She understood that in the face of authority, irrefutable documentation is the ultimate power. This story proves that the most potent tool against institutional overreach is often a single, unassailable document and the resolve of the person who holds it. Secondly, the story serves as a devastating warning to developers and homeowners associations everywhere. It exposes the catastrophic hubris of assuming that legal groundwork is a mere bureaucratic formality. In the relentless pursuit of profit and control, the developers in this narrative committed an unforgivable sin. They built an entire community on a foundation of sand, legally speaking. They prioritized speed and sales over due diligence, a decision that ultimately cost them and countless innocent families millions of dollars. The HOA's arrogance in attempting to enforce rules on the very person who owned the ground beneath them was the height of folly. This case should echo through boardrooms and development plans as a chilling reminder that cutting corners on land ownership isn't just reckless. It is a financial and legal existential threat capable of destroying entire projects and evaporating fortunes overnight. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, this story is a deep inspiration, particularly for families, often Black families and others with historically marginalized roots, for whom land represents far more than equity. It is about heritage, respect, and justice. For generations, systemic forces have worked to strip such families of their legacies through dubious laws, coercion, and violence. This woman's fight was a reclamation of that narrative. She wasn't just defending a financial asset. She was defending a birthright, a connection to her ancestors, and a promise to future generations. In a stunning reversal, she didn't just protect her inheritance. She flipped the entire script. She transformed herself from a target of intimidation into the architect of her own destiny, ensuring that no entity could ever take advantage of her or her legacy again. So, picture the scene one final time. 96 shiny new homes, streets buzzing with families who believe they had achieved the dream, and an HOA board ready to rule with absolute authority. Yet all of it, every brick, every sidewalk, every claim to power, was an illusion, a castle built on another's sovereign ground. The Homeowners Association believed they were building a controlled community. What they inadvertently built, through their own arrogance and negligence, was her empire. Her quiet victory stands as a permanent monument to the idea that true power isn't always seized. Sometimes, it is simply claimed by the one who never let it go.